Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for a curator's talk from the Curator of TULCA 2021, Eoin Dara. I'm just going to give it about 60 more seconds until 5 past so we can see that all of our attendees have managed to sign in, because I know people have different issues with bandwidth, etc. My name is Lucy Elvis, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to be the co-chairperson along with Josephine Vahi of the Board of Directors of TULCA Festival. And on behalf of the board and the team at TULCA, I'd like to welcome everyone who is joining us virtually this afternoon from lots of different places. So we've people from educational institutions, students from GMIT and NUI Galway. I see in the attendees list some curatorial alumni, so hello to Sarah and some of our previous funders. So I see James is there, and many of our really committed TULCA audience members like Stephen and Mel, and other board members like Anne Lyons. So it's 2:05 and we're going to get going. I'm going to briefly introduce Eoin, so I'll give you a little overview into his biography. If you have questions, there's going to be a section for Q&A at the end. So at the bottom of your screen, if you just hover your mouse over the screen there, you'll see a Q&A box on the bottom right. Click into that and you can post your questions, and our technicians, Aoife and Mary, who are very important parts of the TULCA team, and we thank them for being here today, will organise the questions and feed them through to me. So I'll chair the Q&A session at the very end of Eoin's talk. So Eoin is an Irish curator living on the east coast of Scotland. He's the head of exhibitions at Dundee Contemporary Arts, and he's recently been collaborating with and learning from artists like Margaret Salmon, P. Staff, Emma Talbot and Alberta Whittle, as well as writers like C.A. Conrad, Quinn Latimer, Christina Sharp and Isabel Waidner. In previous work at the MAC in Belfast, Dara's curated major exhibition projects such as Felix Gonzalez Torres' This Place, alongside working on new commissions by artists such as Mariah Garnett, Barbara Knezovic, Cara Walker and Johanna Billing. He cites the artists, poets and writers above not to align himself with a particular curatorial position, but to name and honour some of the many co-conspirators who have nurtured his thinking and growth over the past decade. As a former student of the University of Edinburgh, Dara is also an alumnus of the ICI Curatorial Intensive Programme, and he is a director of Catalyst Arts from 2010 to 2012, a co-founder of the Household Curatorial Collective, and is a current trustee of the Outburst Queer Arts Festival. He's been part of recent juries and selection committees for Glasgow International, Lux and the Irish Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. He teaches and lectures occasionally at institutions such as the University of Dundee and Glasgow School of Art, and has contributed recently to public programmes at Frieze London and the Contemporary Arts Society. And for the board, when we were making our curatorial selection, Eoin's approach really stood out for us for its intimacy and the personal connections that we hoped it would bring to Galway. Not being able to imagine, of course, how important these would be in 2021, given that we appointed Eoin as our curator in 2019, when a pandemic seemed like a sci-fi rather than a reality that we would have to live with and among. So it really shows the resilience and importance of these ideas and that they've become truly prescient. So I'm going to hand you over to Eoin, who'll talk to you about the research that informs the festival that we're all looking forward to enjoying together so much. Thanks, Eoin.
Thanks so much, Lucy. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm in Galway, which feels remarkable, and I'm operating from an iPad, which means whenever I go to share my screen, my face is going to disappear, which, to be honest, I'm thrilled about. But just to let you know that this is what I look like. But in a moment, I'm just going to become a disembodied voice. So, hello. Lucy, thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks to Gavin and GMIT for allowing me to speak to you all today about TULCA this year. I know quite a few students are on the call, but then also it's lovely, as Lucy mentioned, really lovely to see some familiar names joining us from further afield in Galway, people in Ireland, but also people a bit further afield, which is great. This it feels like a strange moment to be speaking about the project a few days before it opens, when we still have a great deal to do, as these things always go. But also maybe when so much of the program, I feel myself am only getting to understand on a deeper level now that I'm here in Galway on site. Lucy mentioned I live over on the east coast of Scotland in Dundee, and yes, so much of the development of this project over the last year has been undertaken remotely for obvious reasons. And I wanted to maybe say from the get-go there that on that level, I am and remain completely indebted to David Finn in particular, and the broader TULCA team and board. But David, as TULCA's producer, for his constant work and support over the past year, which has allowed me to envisage what a contemporary art festival might look like in somewhere that I couldn't physically visit until quite close to its time of launch. And has allowed me really then to build up relationships and, most importantly, build up trust with all of the contributors involved in the project to make all that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks possible and, I hope, meaningful. So the project, as TULCA always does, it's one of my favourite things about the festival, started with an open call to artists, and this happened at the height of lockdown in springtime. And at that time, I remember vividly being petrified at the thought of having to write a curatorial statement for the festival. I hadn't even been able to visit the city since saying yes to the invitation to curate the project. And everything in both my personal and professional life just seemed to be uncertain in ways that I could never have imagined. And of course, I know I'm not alone in those feelings or feeling those things at that time. And the way that I tried to kind of move through that is, instead of writing a curatorial statement, writing more of a personal letter, trying to be open about the impossibility of the situation I find myself in, and then also just throwing out some loose associations and tangential ideas that I had been kind of obsessing over in my own solitude. And these ideas were focused on different conceptions of touch and intimacy and physical connection, as obvious as that all sounds. In particular, I had been mulling over a question posed by the poet Ocean Vuong in his beautiful poem, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, where he asked, don't we touch each other just to prove we're still here? And I suppose all of these months later, I still think of that question a lot. And in many ways, the festival itself, I hope, is very much about offering up some conversations now around intimacy and closeness and connection at a time when we're all just beginning to gather again, carefully in proximity to one another. I should also say, in relation to other things I was maybe repeatedly consuming in lockdown, the title of the project, There's Nothing Here But Flesh and Bone, There's Nothing More, is of course lifted longingly from George Michael's 2006 masterpiece, Outside, which in my opinion is one of the most perfect pop songs out there. But beyond that is also a piece of work that advocates and calls for an abundance of physical intimacy in public spaces. And this was a song I had on repeat in my flat for weeks in lockdown. Anyway, being able to have these conversations about touch and closeness and connection then with artists and filmmakers and poets whose work I admire, whose work I adore, has really sustained me this year. And I can't wait to be able to share all of this work with you, I hope, properly in just a few days. But for this afternoon, I thought I could just give a glimpse into some of the different elements of the festival. And this is by no means exhaustive, but I hope it'll kind of give you a meandering sort of overview of the range of work and ideas that are in the mix. Most importantly, so then you, if you're able to visit, can go and meander around these things yourself and craft your own understanding of it and bring your own meaning to the project. Some of the artworks in the program, quite a lot of the artworks in the program, focus on different kinds of bodies, of flesh and bone, exploring how we might inhabit them, how we might connect them with others, both living and dead, real and imagined, how we use them to resist or repair, how we care for them, how we find grace within them, and how we love and nurture them. Other projects in the program kind of reach back in time to touch forgotten figures or retell overlooked histories, spin out lost narratives in order to try and kind of bring these old stories or forgotten figures into our contemporary moment, so that they might allow us to understand our current situation a little better. And there are also works elsewhere that then reach across the world, particularly during the past year, during the pandemic, to craft community and togetherness when traveling, for example, to be with one another was physically impossible. And other works that then chart epic journeys into the unknown together, kind of thinking through or thinking towards an uncertain future where we can't understand how much we have transformed the world around us. As I mentioned, the contributors to the program this year are artists, filmmakers, writers, and poets. There are artworks to see in the form of films and drawings and paintings and sculptures and installations. There are also artworks to listen to in the form of soundscapes. There's an artwork to smell in the form of a perfume. There's correspondence to read in the form of love letters. There are talks to attend beyond this one from much more interesting voices than mine. There is a workshop to taste. There is a performance to witness. There's a lot going on, we hope. And perhaps, as I already mentioned, my letter in lockdown, I will begin by signaling towards some other kinds of correspondence that form a really important part of the festival this year. Namely, a little folio of love letters that really form the backbone of TULCA's publishing for 2021. And so this publication, as it were, which takes shape and form in different ways, but as an object, which is coming back from the printers very soon, we hope, is a little folio of individually hand-folded love letters, and intimate kind of correspondence written over the past year from different writers and poets that I extended an invitation to in different parts of the world. There are 9 voices in particular in this element of the project, them being Sophia Almeria, Claire Biddles, C.A. Conrad, Theodore Kerr, Sakai Machache, Mira Matar, Mihal McCann, Nisha Ramaya, and J.G. Ying. And I extended a very open invitation to these writers and poets at a time when we really didn't know what was going to be possible, physically maybe, for the project, and at a time when all of us were focusing on close correspondence in ways that we maybe weren't previously, or pre-COVID. And I have asked them, and they have written me love letters or letters of longing towards something or someone that is just out of reach. And the letters then that I've got back, which I'm almost overwhelmed thinking about again, and we've been reading a lot over the past week, again, because we're going to be displaying physically some of the letters in the city, form this gorgeous, various slippery series of conversations with different people or things or ideas that are beyond our reach. And these letters will appear at each venue in the festival. So at every exhibition space, you will also be given the chance to read a letter from someone. And also a selection of them will appear at Galway City Library over the course of the shows, on the windows or in the windows of the library, kind of rubbing up against all of the other signs and notices and glorious events that make up a public library. You will also have these very kind of private moments of correspondence. The publication itself, you will be able to pick up and read, and if you want, purchase over the course of the festival, where half of the proceeds of this publication will be going towards medical aid for Palestinians, and the other half going to support TULCA's future programming and success. So if you have a few euro over the course of the project and would like all of these voices in your life, it would be wonderful if you wanted to pick up a copy. The second presence, I suppose, that appears at more than one venue in the festival is a new artwork by Tanya McMullen. And for TULCA this year, Tanya has created a scent for the festival that appears close to the entrance of each exhibition venue across the city. The artwork takes the form of a limited edition perfume, as well as an accompanying scented hand sanitizer, for obvious reasons, that you'll be able to sample, smell, and wear if you wish as you move around the rest of the festival. The perfume itself contains water from the Corrib River here in the city. It contains honey from Galway bees, rainwater from Edinburgh, and a careful chemical mix of hedione, geosmin, and isoamyl acetate. And these particular chemical compounds that Tanya has selected talk about lots of different things and point to lots of different things, but in a broad sense, they encourage, or that we're hoping that they encourage our bodies to think about ways of being together, and new ways of intimacy, or enacting intimacy after such a long period of isolation over the course of the pandemic. When you see the scent at the festival, it appears with a little postcard that you can take with you, that gives you a bit more information about what it is you may or may not choose to put on your body, to put on your wrist, to put on your neck, or to maybe spray in front of you and walk through its wake. Or indeed, if you don't want to do that, simply spray it on the postcard and take that with you as a scent to carry along into the rest of the exhibition. But in particular, these details here that I'm showing are the specifics of the chemicals that are involved in this kind of olfactory provocation. So hedione specifically activates areas in our limbic system, which is a part of the brain associated with emotions and memory and motivation. And it is said to encourage, to physically engender intimacy amongst bodies in its presence. And then petrichor, some of you might be familiar with that term as describing the smell of rain or the smell after rain. And geosmin is the chemical compound that is responsible for this scent in the natural world. And it is said to be something that we as humans have an evolutionary sensitivity to, because it calls to our attention the presence of water. And then finally, isoamyl acetate is found or is released when a honeybee stings and half of her body is ejected and she dies. But her last act is to release this alarm pheromone into the air that alerts her sisters to danger, and compels them to gather and return home. And so these things are all physically present in the scent that Tonya has made for us, and the scent that you all, if you're able to come and visit us, are invited to smell, to wear, and to maybe think about as you then go around to see other artworks and think about other ideas. So the venues that you will find this work at are at the Unpost Gallery, at Galway Arts Centre, at 126, the brilliant artist-led space in the city, and Columban Hall. And so what I thought I'd do now is just dip into some of the plans for each of these spaces to give you an idea of just some of what to expect when you visit, and just to highlight and celebrate some of the artists and the works involved. This is work that will be in Unpost by Isabel Neviaski, who is a multidisciplinary artist who makes work in painting and drawing and writes poetry and texts, but all of their practice is really rooted in drawing. And on the display in the gallery, we're going to be having a snapshot of this work that Isabel makes prolifically, and that kind of offers a glimpse into their life over the past 18 months through the drawings that they make almost every single day. So we are displaying, I think, around about 50 or 60 drawings in this beautiful kind of precise but also expansive constellation that Isabel has designed. And these are very intuitive and immediate and intimate little artworks. I am unreasonably enamored with them, with Isabel's use of line, which just to me has such honesty and grace to build figures and scenes and shapes from their everyday life. And in these scenes, you'll see personal details and intimate moments concerning their own life, their own family, their beautiful baby and other loved ones, as well as other, I suppose, what we would now recognize as use of universal images or circumstances from our collective experiences moving through the pandemic, such as taking a COVID test, or faces constantly wearing masks, or queuing for medical results. Elsewhere in Unpost, we are for the first time bringing the collective, the Many-Headed Hydra, to Ireland, which I'm really excited about. And the Many-Headed Hydra are a collective of gorgeous queers based in different parts of the world, but very often working out of Berlin, with some Irish artists in the mix. And they are a collective dedicated to queer and feminist ecologies, and they make artworks and create environments that play around with ideas of myth making, shape shifting, bodies of water and liquid and wetness, as well as publishing. So artworks that physically inhabit spaces, and then publications that kind of go out into the world and infiltrate the environments that, or the other kind of places that they're posted to. And these flags that you see, are these almost kind of tapestry-like works are currently gently billowing towards the back of the gallery in An Post. And these are gorgeous hand-dyed and screen-printed swathes of cotton that each carry these gestures with hands and bodies and different suggestions of meaning and gathering and touch in relation to very particular queer myths and ritual and fictional kind of figures. Another work in An Post, which we're incredibly excited about, is a new film commission by the artists and writers Adrian Howard and Kay Patrick. And this film reimagines a 13th century manuscript called Roman de Silence, which basically radical at its time and still today, to a certain extent, explores very strange ideas to do with sound and silence, but then also gender and sexuality and nature. And this old tale centers on the life of a person called Silence, who was born a woman but raised as a man. And Adrian and Kay's interpretation takes characters from this old manuscript, this kind of ancient tale, and puts them into different kind of embodied and disembodied objects. So the character of Silence in this new film is an armpit, and a further character called Merlin is, in this film, inhabits a rock. And you have this gorgeous and surreal conversation and relationship played out between an armpit and a rock in this lush kind of wild forest landscape. And the original text of this tale has been taken and adapted by the artist into this new kind of poetic form. And as well as that, they've been working with incredible musicians to compose a soundtrack that gives voice to the armpit, which is voiced by a cello, and the rock, which appears as the sound of a saxophone. Elsewhere in the city, in Galway Arts Centre, in the ground floor galleries, we're going to be showing a new body of work in painting and drawing by Galway-based artist Miriam de Burka. And this work focuses on unmarked burial sites across Ireland, which I'm sure some of you will know about, called Killiany, which were used to bury unbaptized babies until as recently as the 1980s, but also other souls that were considered unsuitable for consecrated ground by the church. So we're talking unmarried mothers, the mentally ill, queer people, unknown strangers, disabled children, or changelings as they were known horrifically, or excommunicates. All of these kinds of people who were outcasts from that society were laid to rest here to be exiled into an eternal state of limbo. And these sites that are far more prevalent than you would imagine in Ireland were crafted, of course, by servants of the church in order to disappear into the landscape. Their locations are inconspicuous and unremarkable. And Miriam has, for a number of years now, been making this body of work where she is visiting these sites that she sees as a kind of blind spot in our national psyche, as sites of oblivion. And she's making work to try and make the spaces visible again in different ways. And one way that she does this, that will be on display as part of the show, is that she selects samples of flora and plant life and minerals that grow in these grounds, and make these incredibly beautiful and detailed drawing studies, kind of analytical studies of this land, as a way of kind of interrogating it and the charge that it holds. Upstairs in the Art Centre, we are also going to be producing an exhibition of work by the artist Jasmine Johnson, which is a gorgeous body of drawing and painting that looks at the artist's ongoing interest in love and care, but also addiction and loss, and particularly focuses on experiences such as these in the past 18 months during times of extreme isolation. The images that form the paintings and the drawings step off from messages and photographs that were sent to the artist from different queer friends and loved ones living in different cities around the world during various lockdowns. And Johnson kind of made these then beautiful, again, analytical studies of other people's and other loved ones far away, domestic scenes and snapshots and objects from their place of isolation into hers. The drawings really capture, carefully, personal objects and ephemera, such as here, that might seem commonplace or mundane, but actually the more you start to look at these works and you see them in series and you build up these different kind of pictures of the people that they really form portraits of, they become these really highly charged and deeply human and tender artworks that I think are actually quite emotional. They're so beautiful. This image, just same with Miriam, same with Isabel, as always, images on a screen of drawings and paintings never do the work justice, but oh boy, wait till you see these in the flesh. They're truly stunning. Then just to touch briefly on two of the kind of film installations that are inhabiting other venues in the city. In 126, we are going to be staging the European premiere of Vishal Jagdeo and Vikwiram's film, Does Your House Have Lions?, which is an incredible kind of experimental documentary that has been collaboratively made by the Delhi-based poet and organizer and activist Vikwiram and the Los Angeles-based artist Vishal Jagdeo. And this is the latest in what is an ongoing collaborative practice between these two individuals across gigantic geographies. And it's a film that's shot in Delhi as well as Bombay and Goa. And it follows Vikwiram, who is this remarkable poet and speaker and artist and organizer and member of the trans and non-binary community in India. And it follows them and their housemates, as well as other friends and lovers and co-conspirators in activism and survival over a 4-year period of really turbulent political upheavals and unrest in India. And throughout, you kind of have these moments of real intimacy and community building and tenderness and private human friendship set against or set within a society that in many ways still seeks to erase bodies like this or deny them the agency that they deserve. As well as this, then the work kind of becomes a document of Vishal's own relationship with his collaborators, Vishal being the real kind of filmmaker in this sense. And kind of becomes then an archive of these sorts of friendships in collaborative art practices. And I suppose finally as well, in terms of how it was produced and made, it then also becomes a kind of keenly crafted film that documents making this kind of work in COVID or in the pandemic, where by the end of the film, we're in lockdown across the world, and Vishal is directing scenes remotely with the Queerum on FaceTime on a mobile device or similar. Again, it's a truly gorgeous work, and perhaps the film work in the festival that comes close to almost being feature length, in that it's about 50 minutes long. So please book in and spend some good time with this over the course of the festival. Not so long, coming in at around 13 minutes, which is I think is probably my favorite length for a video installation, is a new work by Mariah Garnett, which we are staging as quite a spectacular installation, actually, having visited it over the weekend in its final, as we're making final tweaks to the install. And this is a work called The Power of Life is Love. And it's the first iteration of what I think will be a gigantic project, where Mariah is looking at the figure of her great-great-aunt Ruth and archive materials that relate to her great-great-aunt that are stranger than fiction, really. So her Aunt Ruth, great-great, was an American composer and spiritualist who lived in Cairo in the 1920s. And while she was there, she somewhat dubiously acquired an ancient stone head, which, according to Ruth, housed a spirit named Ta, who became her lover and confidant and writing partner. And in 1935, Ruth and this spirit contained within this bust in Egypt wrote an opera together, which has never been produced. And so this is the first iteration of Mariah taking this wild archival material relating to this very strange figure in her family history and making a kind of public presentation of this opera for the first time, and playing around with the original score, stripping back or calling to attention the problematics of some of its Orientalist overtones, but also creating this work. Mariah is now based in California, that centers these two incredible Black opera singers, Brianna Sinclair and Christopher Paul Craig, and celebrating their friendship and an intimacy between these two figures, where Brianna, who was the first trans woman to earn a master's from the Conservatoire opera program of the LA Opera, she kind of plays this queen speaking to another monarch in the form of Christopher's tenor, about love and survival and family and human connection in a time of perpetual war. It's the scale of it being presented in the space that we're working in Columban Hall, which is an old church hall, is really magnificent. And we've been able to, like, quite apart from anything, for example, we've been able to crank up the volume and have that as a really quite a spectacular thing. So that's a kind of snapshot of lots of the different projects happening in the exhibition program, if that makes sense. There are other elements of the project beyond the publication and beyond the love letters that are happening as events and one-offs. Please God, we're allowed to realize them. This weekend, we are going to be staging a new development of Harren Morrison's performance work, Nothing Special, which is a text that is performed as a reading that consists of 365 statements that kind of outline everyday scenarios. And the performance simply involves a reader sat at a table reciting this script for around 40 minutes. It becomes it kind of builds and builds and builds and becomes a hugely powerful work. And for me, these kind of observations and the texts that form this monologue really riff off the kind of giant question that I suggested earlier on, that Ocean Vuong poses, that don't we touch each other just to prove we're still here? Haren's writing focuses on these really small poetic ruptures in our thinking that might disturb an otherwise mundane day or situation. And this work is kind of ever developing and has been staged and read twice so far, once in England and once recently in Italy, where it was translated and delivered in Italian as well as English. And so for TULCA this year, we have been working to stage 2 different iterations of the work, an English recital and an Irish recital. And we've been working, and Haren has been speaking particularly with Kate Nicini to translate the text into Irish, and then also with theatre makers Mairead and Ionia Nicrunan to stage the piece in Nuns Island Theatre this weekend, where Ionia will be delivering the script. And then finally, towards the end of the festival, we're going to have an evening of cinema at Palace, with brilliant screenings by 3 different Irish artists, Lauren Galt, Amanda Rice, and Patrick Hall, that look at very different ways, but kind of look at these different gorgeous forms of excavation from the land, and look at bog bodies and bog butter and ancient deer and forgotten myths and histories in landscapes not too far from here. And I think I'll leave it there, because I could go on. I mean, with every single work there, I could probably talk for another 20 minutes. But I'm also aware that no one has seen these things yet, and I'm just wanting to give a kind of flavour of what's to come in the next few weeks.
Well, thank you, Eoin, so much for that presentation. I can't wait now till Friday to get around and see some of those works. Really exciting. So we've got a few questions coming in now in the Q&A, so just remind you all, it's the box at the bottom right, so not the chat but the Q&A panel, and if you could type the questions in there and then I'll relay them to Eoin. But first of all, I just wanted to go back to the open call. If I've curated shows myself, when you release the open call, it's a bit like having a house party and hoping that people are going to come along, right? And worse again when you're isolated and you haven't even been to the city that you're being commissioned to curate for. So I wondered if you could say a little bit more about the process of the open call, because it's a really important part of the TULCA identity, that we have this balance of artists that are invited and those that are more surprising. So maybe could you tell us maybe what surprised you in the open call and what the response was like from artists?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was one of the biggest pieces of work I think that I've undertaken this year, and one of the most also one of the most like nurturing pieces of work that I've been able to do this year, because of the response. So, and I've always known that that's such an important part of what TULCA is. And I think, within the strange politics of open calls in general, TULCA does it very well. And so whenever I put out that letter, quite apart from anything, I was feeling quite isolated at the time, along with everyone else, and wasn't sure, couldn't gauge how that letter would hit, how it would land, who would respond. And as far as I understand it, the kind of a popular year at TULCA would see a couple of hundred applications come in through the open call, which that was in my head. And whenever the closing date passed, we had over 500 had people in contact, and that was both heartening and terrifying, really, because of the nature of the project. You know, I think I remember saying to friends at the time, there were probably 50 proposals in the mix there that I would have loved to have like committed to and seen, you know, happen. But the reality is, you know, we would never be able to be commissioning or working with that amount of artists. So that was a real challenge, but also gave me such a like remarkable opportunity to tap into, I would say particularly tap into Irish practice, that I feel like I've all, you know, I'm Irish and I've worked in projects in Ireland for all of my career in different ways, shapes and forms, but having been in Scotland now for a few years, and in particular then having been completely removed physically from Galway and from Ireland in trying to think of the festival, you know, if it wasn't for COVID, I would have been in Ireland doing studio visits. I would have been trying to see a lot of work and all of that. And so this year, maybe more than ever, the open call was so useful for me to get a sense of what artists were making and doing and thinking about at the moment or this year. And also then to have the chance to enter into dialogue and correspondence on quite an emotional level as well, if I'm honest. In some respects, on a bad day when I was exhausted, I was like, oh God, why was I so honest in that letter? Like, why couldn't I have just told everyone I was grand? But I wouldn't change it, you know. I think it's been an amazing part of the project, which I feel like I feel like curators maybe don't often say that about an open call. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
It seems like there's a beautiful sense of kind of honesty in a gentle rather than a brutal sense in lots of the work in the festival. I'm really looking forward to seeing that, but it's going to be quite exposing experience to go and engage with those many different kind of pieces and have those spaces closed down. Speaking of spaces, I've got 2 questions in the Q&A that relate to spaces in Galway, and we have quite a particular situation, I guess, in relation to infrastructure. For people who are not local on the call, we don't have a great deal of infrastructure here, so that's kind of a challenge. So a question from Gavin and a question from Helen. I'm going to just fold them together if that's okay. So Gavin says, can you tell us a little bit more about your reactions to the various spaces that you've used or encountered for TULCA? What has been challenging, enchanting or unexpected? And Helen says, apologies if she missed it, but could you tell us more about the spaces that the work is shown in? So 2 similar questions, one maybe about your reactions and another one more about the spaces themselves.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that's absolutely an important part actually that I omitted maybe in what I talked through, is the kind of physical environments that the works will be placed in. So yeah, I mean, did Gavin say enchanted and challenging? That's a perfect kind of combination. So there's a mix of venues and sites for the festival, some of which are dedicated gallery spaces, such as Galway Arts Centre, as well as 126 Gallery that operate in the city beyond TULCA and have wonderful programs of their own. And the teams there, you know, the committee at 126 and the team at the Arts Centre, I'm hugely grateful to, because what an honour to be able to be kind of gifted those kind of exhibition spaces in a city for a project like this when you're not of the city and I'm not working in those organisations. So there's some spaces that are not really typical, but you know, they're white cube gallery spaces that are used for exhibitions the year round. But then there are spaces like Columban Hall, which is the old church hall that I mentioned, where we're installing Mariah's work, which is rough and ready, to say the least. David and the technical team have been doing incredible work there over the past month or so to get that space inhabitable, I suppose, to get power and electricity into it, to get the walls blacked out and projections in there and sound. And it's been amazing to see that transformed from whenever I first was able to visit it at the start of the summer. And then the main kind of festival gallery space, or the main exhibition space, is An Post, which I mentioned, which is this incredible former factory space. Would you say that, Lucy? Right, for the post office. That is this. I feel like that's the site that feels. That's the site that feels very kind of like sexy in a contemporary art way. You know, kind of big industrial former factory space that art is now being placed in. And for those reasons is also probably one of the most challenging sites, because it doesn't have, you know, any kind of structures around it to help. And also has a, you know, has a leaky roof and it's chilly, and we're talking about it having a festival in Ireland in November. So all of those things have been quite complex conversations to make sure that we're making the best possible kind of experience for visitors coming to the city who might not be familiar with the urban landscape here, and then also, of course, audiences in Galway who are going to come and spend time. You know, I can't be asking people to come and spend 20 minutes in a film installation if it's, you know, freezing cold and wet. But also, we're all used to it here. Like, you know, that's par for the course. So the spaces are a real mixed bag, and I think they're hugely exciting. As well as then Nuns Island, which is a dedicated theatre space for Harron's work, which feels exciting to me because I never get to work in a theatre space. So that's always nice.
There's always something really nice when we get to work in spaces like An Post and Columban Hall, because often they're just off limits to everyone in Galway. So it's a real chance to see a kind of hidden side of the city where they're transformed. I remember the first year that we had an opening in the An Post space. I think it was Anya Phillips. He said, "Oh, it's like London has come to Galway." We were like, "We've arrived." Maybe not. I've kind of a comment here from Rita, who is the administrator at Engage, and she's one of our board members as well. And she says it's wonderful to see a festival that's representative of queer stories, particularly coming to the west of Ireland, and to see your care and passion for these subjects. And then she says, "Congratulations, Eoin. It's lovely to hear you speaking so poetically and enthusiastically about the projects." And I agree. Halfway through, I was like, I wish I could have the recording as an audio tour. That would be so soothing. Like the rest of us, can't wait for this year's TULCA.
I mean, I think, thank you, Rita. Yeah. Oh God, everything about this project is personal for me. So on a personal level, as a queer person from another edge of the island up north, I've spent a lifetime wanting to see and hear and experience queer stories and narratives, and in the places where I feel like I belong or where I come from. And I don't come from big cities, and I don't come from, you know, those kind of easily understood centers of cultural production, where perhaps that kind of work is readily available. So it feels like an absolute honor to have so many gorgeous queer voices and queer artists in this program in Galway. Yeah.
Oh, Stephen, who often attends all of our events and is a wonderful supporter of TULCA. He says, "Are there openings and curatorial talks and walk arounds happening this year?" Because the curator's tour is usually a really high point in our calendar. And he's just wondering to what extent he can expect an events programme at TULCA, given the pandemic, because we really prioritise the safety of our artists and audiences, so we can keep showing contemporary art rather than just cramming people in as soon as we can.
I mean, of course, the conversations that we've been having about physically gathering people have just been ongoing for, months and months and months now. And we're just taking it. It still feels like in some ways we're taking it one day at a time. We're being extremely careful with that. And so whilst we don't necessarily have some, huge party planned as an opening, much as we'd love to, we have all safety measures in place at every venue to ensure comfort, but most of all safety of our audiences. And we do have some in-person talks and events. So Haren's performances on this coming Saturday and next coming Saturday. We have I will be giving a wander and a talk and a chat around the main Ampost gallery space that we were just talking about. And now off the top of my head, I can't remember when that's happening. I think it's the last Friday of the festival in the morning. And of course, we have the cinema screenings and things like that. And that's like all those kinds of organizing for public gatherings at the moment. It's a strange one to be thinking through. But I hope we've kind of struck a balance between lots of things that you can physically attend and experience in the flesh, as it were, as well as making sure that nothing is lost by not being able to have those larger gatherings. So we have these talks happening online. We have three more artist talks over the course of the festival. They'll be happening in this digital sphere, as well as actually an event which isn't quite in person but feels really intimate in other ways, with Tanya McMullen, who has made the scent for the festival. Tanya is going to be running a honey tasting workshop on the 11th of November. And whilst that will be delivered online, it's specifically aimed at local audiences, people here in Galway. And whenever you book a place for that workshop, you have to come to the gallery and pick up your honey samples to prepare for the tasting over the course of that evening. So I hope that will be a nice kind of intimate thing, even though it is on Zoom ultimately.
Definitely a chance to reach across the divide anyway. And just to remind everybody, David, our producer, aside from being a whiz at transforming spaces and supporting artists and curators and quite a frazzle board, manages our website and manages it very, very carefully. So all of the event listings, you'll find details and booking links there, as well as on our Facebook and on our Instagram, which is maintained by Mary, who's in the background here giving us a hand. Another question here that says, can you tell us a little bit more, or maybe give us a summary of your curatorial vision? And then another message of congratulations from somebody who's really looking forward to the festival. And perhaps I'm wondering, are they thinking about how this particular curatorial project fits into your approach and outlook overall, maybe?
Ooh, God, that is okay. A curatorial vision. Okay, give me one moment, because I don't want to just rhyme off something. I don't have any kind of dogmatic curatorial vision for the way in which I work, because I think most of all I work extremely closely with artists in order to try and help realize their visions. And it's not about me as an author shaping a particular narrative. It's about me as a source of support, I hope, and maybe care in trying to nurture artistic practice that's much more important than curatorial practice, maybe. But the only thing maybe I'll say is that, because I was asked specifically about this in the context of some teaching at a curatorial studies program recently, and I a question maybe that I've been working through in my practice for some time maybe centers on an idea of love. And is it possible to work with a productive conception of love that makes curatorial or artistic methodology, and can I champion artists who are pushing forward radical conceptions of love in their work, in their practice, and that idea of love as a productive force or whatever comes specifically from the writer Bell Hooks, and her definition of love as an action and not just a feeling, because if love is an action, there is responsibility inherent within it, and it can be an accountability, responsibility and accountability, and within that it can then be used as a powerful kind of tool or catalyst for change. Bell Hooks has written, it's a Bible for me, this incredible book called All About Love, that I think everyone should read. And she kind of puts forward this really expansive idea of love comprising six ingredients. I think it's 6 ingredients. Basically, care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility. Oh, I forget them now. Care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, trust, and the other one's gone. But anyway, maybe I'm trying to mix these kind of ingredients into my curatorial work, or into the support that I'm trying to offer artists or the exhibitions that I might want to bring into the world. Sorry, that was a very meandering answer, but it was a big question.
That was a weighty one, I have to say. It's very reminiscent of Sarah Brown's curatorial talk that happened about this time last year. And the notion of care as a radical act really ran like a red thread through her festival as well. And it seems as though these ideas need a bit of a careful reorientation away from passivity towards action. Because when we really interrogate them, of course, the thing that I love provokes me to do so much. There's a educational theorist that informs some of the TULCA programme when we're doing outreach work, and he says, care is the leading edge of a judgment, and it's always judgment that precedes action. And I think when we rethink care in that way, it becomes something that's a powerful motivator as opposed to just a fluffy expression that I'm going to put out into the world. So that's really interesting to me, of course, and certainly I think to audiences as well. James Harold, who is our outgoing City Arts Officer, I miss him already actually, James, it's terrible, but he says congratulations to Eoin and TULCA. He's really looking forward to the festival. She's looking forward to attending it as an audience member as well. Must be nice to change those hats. I have an anonymous attendee question that says, great work, Eoin. It's super important to see love in queer practice, where there's a dominance of sexuality and eroticism that often eschews the subtleties of love, and things like care, commitment, knowledge, and responsibility. And Julia, who's incredibly helpful, says that she thinks respect might be number 6 in the bell.
Respect, of course. Also, I will not to further go into this, but we also need like sexuality and eroticism and pleasure and all of those things that form like the messiness and the slipperiness of love and care. I don't know if I'd agree that there's a dominance of sexuality and eroticism, but I also do understand what's being said there. There's such a glorious mix of things at play. Maybe
there's a false bifurcation between the choice. Is it dominance and sexuality or care and intimacy? Perhaps this year's TULCA is a place where we can see those kind of messy intermingling of the two, especially when you consider it in relation to things like the body and Tanya's olfactory work.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm going to just give it one more second in case there's any more burning questions. That's a really diverse set of different concerns, but I know it's very tiring. Poor Owen.
No, this is good. I mean, this is my favorite bit. I would much rather have questions. And also, this is the bit where I would much rather us be in a room together, so we could just. So the energy isn't so strange, but there we are.
It's really hard to see whether, without that affective space of bodies, is there a feeling of mutual understanding or not? I sometimes
maybe everyone's furious,
screaming into the void. So it sounds like people have perhaps just gone away to order their copies of Bell Hooks.
Oh, that would be great if someone is going away from this and ordering a copy of a book by Bell Hooks, like, success. That's fine.
Oh, I see a question has already popped up. Oh, someone says all the best. They're going to send someone called Evan to scout out, but unfortunately they're anonymous in the attendees.
I wonder who Evan is.
I don't know. Make yourself known, Evan, if you attend the gallery space. Yeah. You can meet our volunteers there. And as Owen has reminded us, actually, oh, that was Alan Phelan. As Owen's reminded us, the weather is particularly inclement in Galway at this time of year. So there's two things perhaps we might remind you before we close out the Q&A and the talk. If you're coming to our events, it would be fantastic if you could book, not least of which it's very important for us to keep justifying the work that we do, because we think that the civic conversations, that's something as beautiful and rich as an edition of TULCA can provoke, are really important for helping us work out where we are right now and where we should go from here, personally and politically and publicly as well. So please do register for our events. Please do attend. Don't be put off by the rain. We're not made of sugar. But if you're popping into the gallery, do say hello to our team, because they're particularly passionate. They'll be present in the space if you need any help or any assistance booking into events or workshops, or any information about any of the pieces. They are fantastically briefed by Mary McGraw, who is our volunteer and community development manager. So Stephen says he's going to have to get a book by Bell Hooks shortly. Fantastic. He's got another one on offer as well. It's nice to see how well read our audiences are. And Mel, thanks you for the talk. She says it's been a great talk and really, really interesting. So I thank everybody else for attending. Thanks as always to Dave and Aoife and Mary, who are in the background doing all of our work. If they were less shy, I might ask them to turn their cameras on and just wave so we can thank them, but that's all right if they're feeling a bit self-conscious too. Look out for Aoife. She's our new education coordinator. So if you're bringing groups from schools or colleges, you'll encounter her in our team this year. She's done a lot of work to really sensitively design educational tours that help empower the voices of young people to ask about the work and feel welcome in galleries as civic spaces where democracy matters. Mary will be in charge of our volunteers, and she'll be looking after all the spaces as well as looking after audiences at our events, and always does a fantastic job. So thank you so much for attending. Do check out tulca.ie for all of our events listings and things that are coming up. And it just remains me to thank Owen so much for his time today. It's been really wonderful. I can't wait for Friday.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I can't wait either. Imagine.
I know, it's come around really fast.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lucy. That was lovely.
Excellent. Well, this talk is going to be recorded. Our Otter AI software has had a small glitch, so a transcript will be available and it will be edited by Jonathan, who's our excellent documentation person, and it will be posted sometime during or post the festival run to the website, so you can revisit these ideas in respect of what I'm sure will be wonderful, intimate and provoking experiences over the next couple of weeks. Have a fantastic afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for coming, everyone.